Speaking of aces in football, of course, you're a football fan, John. Anytime we see Hall of Fame like quarterbacks go face to face, right? Face off. They don't necessarily play against each other, but it's always a matchup. For such a long time, it's always Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, whenever their teams faced off against each other. But for you, was there a Hall of Fame ace that got you fired up? Like when you knew you were going to be pitching the same day this guy was going to be pitching. This is a guy that I got to bring my A game. Granted, you brought your A game every time, but it was something different. It was more motivation knowing that you're playing against that said player. If you had that player, who is that player? Who was that player for you?
Yeah, there were many, but the one that sticks out easily is Pedro Martinez. He was a freak, 5'11", through 98, had all kinds of curveball, sliders, changeup. He was the guy that when you went toe-to-toe against him, you knew you couldn't give up any runs. I think we finished 2-2 against each other. And I'll never forget the game I had him beat. I was winning 1-0, and I struck out 16 guys through going into the 8th inning.
Wow.
And with 2 outs and an 0-2 man on first, I gave up a 2-run homer.
To who?
It was the only mistake I made, to Carlos Beltran. And I know that game like it was yesterday because I had Pedro beat 1-0, and I lost that game giving up that 2-run homer. But when you face guys like that in baseball, yes, same in football. In the National League, we're facing them at the plate, but we're really not pitching against them. You just know that you can't make mistakes.
Right.
And I think that's the same way in football. When you go up against greatness and there's 38 seconds left on the clock and you give that team the ball, there's a good chance they're going to go down and score because of that quarterback leading it. And it's the same way in pitching in baseball. If you give a great pitcher a 2-run lead in the first inning, there's a good chance he's going to hold it. And so you try to pitch in a way where you have such admiration for the other guy on the mound, even though you're not like my game 7 against Jack Morris. He was my idol growing up as a Tiger. Even though I wasn't really pitching against him, I kind of am in the sense that he's the guy I know is not going to give up any runs. So you have to have that mindset going up in a game 7. And ultimately I was able to do it, but he did it better. He went 10 innings. I only went 8. Yeah. And they ended up winning 1-0.
That's one of the more epic games too. If you think about, during the postseason run, that game 7 against your idol, Jack Morris.
It was. And I wish I had more. I wish I had more years under my belt to tell my manager to get off the mound, like he told his manager. But I didn't. And that was step 1 of our run that I never dreamt would go 14 years. Yeah. And I dreamt as a kid playing in a game 7. I pitched in. I tell people all the time. They say, "What was it like to pitch in a game 7 when everything it means everything, right? It's the final game of the year." And I said, what people don't understand is I pitched 100 of them when I was a kid growing up. I lived in a small town in Lansing, Michigan, and I had a brick wall and a rubber ball, and I threw against that brick wall with a strike zone made of tape. And my parents allowed me to pursue baseball, even though I come from a musician's family of accordions, of all things, something nobody even knows about anymore. And I would pitch game 7 after game 7 as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. And in my mind, I played it out. And I believed that when I got in the situation to live it out for real, that it would be just like it was in Lansing, Michigan against that brick wall. And it was everything I thought about. And I tell kids all the time, if you don't think it, dream it, you'll never achieve it. If you don't believe it, you'll never get to that point of at least pretending and playing it out in your mind what it's going to be like. And every postseason game was exactly like that to me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing because all great ones have that same mindset and that same thought process as well. Because Brian can tell you, he had those same thought process, and the same with me.